Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Big Nickel IDP podcast. I am your host, Jon Macri, fantasy analyst at PFF. Thank you for joining us for another one. On this episode, we continue to review the landing spots of the top IDPs from the NFL draft. Rolling on with the safety position, there's a few we like for fantasy potential and a few fugazis as well. Which ones are which? Well, that's why we're here to figure it all out. So let's get it. All right, good folks, we are back, and we're still in rookie mode with Dynasty rookie drafts still going on and plenty more still to come. Last episode, we talked rookie edges with my guy Joey the Tooth, and now we move on to the safety position with King of the Nerds, the Dynasty Nerds, that is Mr. Jon Glosser. Jon, thanks again for coming on. How are you, my friend?
Very good, Jon. I'm glad to be back with you. Glad we were able to give your fans 2 doses of the John who spell their name correctly or incorrectly. But yeah, real happy to be back and talking some IDP defensive backs, rookie style.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's always fun. I know, this year's safety class a little different, maybe not as exciting as years past, but some interesting players for sure. Anybody that watched the NFL draft noticed that there probably not probably, there wasn't anybody taken in the first round. We thought at least one would go, but it was weird. I mean, I thought, with safety becoming such like a versatile position, I would think the NFL would value it a little bit more, and we just didn't really get that this year.
Yeah, I mean, at least higher than linebackers going in the top 20 and two running backs, but I mean that's for conversation for another day, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all plays out. Obviously, like there's going to be somebody that emerges, I think, from this class, at least one, maybe a few more. There's definitely a few that I like, and that are interesting and could maybe provide some IDP potential, but either way, I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of duds in here as well. Not a lot of the ones that we'll talk about tonight are duds, but for the class as a whole, there's always a lot of safeties that come out. So just kind of tempering expectations with what to expect, and we'll look at depth charts and how these guys kind of fit in and all that stuff as well. But yeah, safety is always a weird one, but a fun one.
Agreed. Always available on your waiver wire, especially those rookies. Yeah. It seems like before they break out or as they're starting to break out. So this is always a good, a good podcast for those kind of still doing their rookie drafts or have a rookie draft upcoming to kind of get a little bit of that, sneaky knowledge that they could kind of bring in and maybe snipe a guy where, some of their league mates won't be as, savvy to getting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just about kind of keeping these names fresh in your mind because, yeah, you're not going to draft all these safeties in your rookie drafts. I mean, a lot of them aren't going to get drafted unless you're in a really deep league or like 7-round rookie drafts, things like that. But they're guys definitely to keep in mind, as you're watching camp battles and injuries that happen and stuff like that, so that you kind of know who they are and maybe what their role might be. So when waivers come, like you said, you could kind of pick them up. We know what we're getting, and hopefully they could deliver for us once the season starts. So yeah, we'll get into all of that with these guys. And I mean, we basically have a list here of, I think we got the first 10 rookie safeties drafted in this year's class. Like we said before, none went in the first round and only one went in the second round. So the pecking order isn't as clear as it has been in the past, but don't fret. That's why we're here, is to help sort these guys for IDP purposes and see who we should be targeting for an immediate impact, who we should be keeping our eyes on for down the road, like we said, and who we can disregard altogether and just hope they have fulfilling lives outside of football, because we are not accepting them into the wonderful land of IDP at this moment. But let's fast forward to day 2 of the NFL draft and kick things off with the first safety off the board. Brian Branch of the Detroit Lions, his second round pick out of Alabama. What'd you think about Branch going to the Lions?
I would have liked it a lot more had Chauncey Gardner Johnson decided not to go there. But I know that there's some, there's definitely some knocks on what's been going on with Tracy Walker over the past couple of years. That's an impending contract coming up as well. I like Branch. We talked about it. He was both of our kind of consensus number one in this class. I know the overall, you know, the take on him is he's probably going to be a nickelback. I see him, being able to be a deep secondary player as well. I think he's kind of proved that at Alabama that he can play a multitude of roles. I think Chauncey Gardner Johnson at this point of his career is probably the better of the two if you're going to go nickel. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes with that depth chart. I mean, I think we were kind of in agreement a year ago, if I remember correctly, that Kirby Joseph's not the guy. I know he was kind of forced into action and did provide some, solid IDP, stability for some people, deep into the season with the Tracy Walker injury and things of that nature. But Branch is a much, much better player. So I see him, especially with that draft capital, I see him being able to be on the field and, overall really heady, smart football player too. So I think the type of guy that, is really going to help the Lions. That secondary definitely got a lot better with this addition. But I don't think he's a guy even being second round. I think he could have snuck into the first round. But even being in the second round there, I think he's a guy that's, going to be looked at as a day one starter, or at least a day one contributor. Hopefully he doesn't get the Kyle Hamilton treatment where he's, played when they decide to play him
Yeah.
because he is, I think he's the one who you're the most excited about in your rookie drafts. If you are looking to safety, even though it's an overall like weak class, he's, the guy who pops out at you first. So really impressed with him as a whole, as a player. So I do see him adding IDP value in year one. I've seen him go everywhere. Round four is probably the earliest I've seen him go, and non, like Debbie depleted type of rookie drafts that we're doing. But after that kind of run of linebackers and edges there, he's kind of the guy that I would be targeting there. So I would say as early as round four. I don't see him falling to the sixth though. So I think the 4 to 5 is kind of the sweet spot for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it, right? Like when you're talking about Chauncey Gardner Johnson, Branch's usage is kind of going to depend on how they want to use Gardner Johnson, right? And we saw, we know Aaron Glenn is the defensive coordinator there for the Lions. He was the DB coach for the Saints when Chauncey Gardner Johnson was there, where they used him basically primarily as a slot corner. The only year that Gardner Johnson really played like a true safety position was last year for the Eagles. And mind you, he had his best year there. He tied for the league lead in interceptions and all that. So maybe not like a lock for the corner role or the slot corner role, but it feels like the most likely situation is putting Gardner Johnson in the slot. And hopefully Branch over Joseph. We'll see. I know, Joseph did some good things last year, kind of surprised us a little bit, but you like you said, you look at the draft capital and the caliber of player, and you may want to get Brian Branch out there, and he's got experience playing at a high level at Alabama as well. So that definitely helps his case. And I do. I still like him as an IDP. A little bit curious about to see how they use him. I don't have him as my top safety right now anymore. I actually moved him down to safety 3 because there's a couple guys that I really like. But so yeah, I'm looking maybe more like 5th round in rookie drafts for Brian Branch. And I mean, pretty much anybody that I really like at safety is going to be a 5th round pick for me in most IDP formats. But there's a couple I might try to grab a little bit earlier if I feel the need. And yeah, Branch, if he was there, could be in consideration. But I do have a couple more in mind, and somebody that we'll talk about shortly, actually. Actually, we'll talk about him right now. Let's talk about him. It's Sidney Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, 3rd round pick out of Illinois. I mean, I was fired up when the Eagles took Branch as the second safety off the board. We talked about how much of a fan of his I was in the pre-draft episode, which was only boosted by me finding out when that he was Canadian. So this is the the landing spot and the capital that I was basically looking for. I needed to move him into my top safety spot for this class, and that's exactly where he is. The Eagles starting safeties from last season. Previously mentioned Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps. Both those guys left in free agency. And while they did add Terrell Edmonds, that second safety spot could use an upgrade. It's Kayvon Wallace, who we've seen on occasion get chances, and unfortunately, he is not him. So we're moving on there. And maybe Reed Blankenship is something, but he's also a UDFA from last rookie class. And we see teams move quickly from these guys, right? They quickly replace guys like that all the time, even if they were halfway decent. Think about Jack Sanborn for Chicago as a recent example of that. So Brown comes in. He's one of the more experienced safeties who played a ton in the box, showed decent coverage skills, and has NFL level athleticism to hold his own as a full-time player. So I'm kind of all in on this one. I love that Brown, what he can bring as a potential IDP star, and think he could even be the primary option to rotate down towards the line of scrimmage over Terrell Edmonds, because he doesn't necessarily have as much experience playing deep, where Edmonds is a little bit better there, even though he was the guy in Pittsburgh that did the rotating down. But that's because Minkah Fitzpatrick was a clear deep safety, right? So he's still probably a 5th round pick for me, early 5th, I'd say, but I'm taking him as safety 1 right now.
I knew your homerism would get the
Yeah.
best of you. Also, Kayvon Wallace being called not him might be the biggest compliment he's ever gotten.
Right.
So, but yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think a big part, going back to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, is a big part of him setting, career highs and tied for league lead in interceptions, was a product of how good that Philly system was. I don't know if everyone paid attention to the NFL draft, but they got a lot better up front. So I think there could be another product of that, of, the big splash plays that Brown could end up making, whether it be near the line of scrimmage or, in the secondary. Terrell Edmonds and Reed Blankenship is a rough duo if you want to throw Kayvon Wallace in there as well. Blankenship played okay in spots last year, but I think a lot of that was due to the fact of how good they were at just terrorizing rushing the passer, and the fact that, it's kind of hard with Darius Slay out there. You don't really want to go after him so much because you're probably going to get picked off and it's going to go the other way. So I think with the entire, Georgia Bulldogs alumni up front and Hassan Reddick, they're, the Eagles are going to be, score a lot of points and frustrate teams into throwing on them late in the game. So I could see Brown, being the top IDP here for defensive backs. So despite your homerism, I think I'm going to agree with you here.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, I mean, overall, as we spoke about in the pre draft episode, we did like his game and what he was able to do at Illinois. I mean, you couldn't have probably asked for a better landing spot, maybe a little bit better draft capital, but as we spoke about, safeties are kind of the disrespected bunch right now, it seems like, over these past couple of years. But yeah, another guy, as we've talked about, like 5th round, if you're playing in those 7-round leagues, which most of those full IDP leagues are, anywhere from I don't think he's making it out of the 5th. I think a lot of people are, recency bias of what Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was able to do there, and just the system that they're building is pretty good there. And, Terrell Edmonds is another one, a guy that I could see washed out in a year, in terms of being in Philly. I don't know how long those contracts were, but I don't think they're very long. And Reed Blankenship was also a late round pick, if not undrafted, if I remember. So, I mean, I think Brown's got the kind of clear advantage there, and Philly will definitely find a way to use him. If not, right away, definitely in a few of those blowout games, which I'm sure they're bound to have this year.
Yeah, for sure. I just hope I don't get Hamiltoned again here with my love for a safety, because that would be heartbreaking. I would start punting the position completely as well, like the NFL, if that happens. But yeah, I feel good about it. Like you said, yeah, Reed Blankenship, UDFA last year. Terrell Edmonds, I believe it is a 1 year deal for him in Philly. So at the very least, we're going to see Sidney Brown on the field pretty shortly for that defense, which will be nice. All right, let's go on to. So this was the third safety, at least according to my positions here, taken in the draft. But interestingly, was announced as a linebacker when they called his name at the draft, and that is Marte Mapu going to the New England Patriots in the third round out of Sacramento State of the FCS. What did you think about Mapu, and are you calling him a linebacker or a safety?
Believe it's a Bill Belichick to draft another guy and not give him a position, right? Whether it's offense or defense.
Yeah.
Um, that defense is just going to be good. Every year that Bill Belichick is there, it seems like that defense gets it done. They're definitely not the reason that they're losing games. It seems like. I know Mapu was kind of a tweener at Sacramento State, probably going to play a little bit of the, I mean, he's way too small for me to say like he's going to be a linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen Bill Belichick do some pretty wild stuff with some smaller type players. So nothing that he does really surprises you. I think he's built a little bit more like a defensive back. I know some of the comps were, hey, these new breed of Darius Leonard type linebackers that can be 220 pounds but run sideline to sideline, but they're instinctive. They can make plays on the ball. I don't know Mapu's, career stats from, big plays. It was kind of not a guy that was on our radar at all,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But, it's the New England Patriots, whether it's offense or defense. It seems like if you're looking for consistency from a IDP or a fantasy scoring standpoint, go find that somewhere else because you're not going to find it there. So,
Yeah.
if he's able to bulk up and kind of learn that system, he seems like he's a smarter player. He can definitely be a weapon there, but it's not. I mean, it's New England, so you're going to be fighting with that 55% to 60% snap count,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to have those big splash plays, and then you're going to start him when you need him, and he's going to get you that big fat zero. So in terms of the player, I think he can mold into something. I mean, maybe he plays like a jack linebacker type. I think like I want to say New England's depth chart right now has him as a Sam. But I
Okay.
mean, who knows what he's actually going to do? There isn't a ton to like there at linebacker, but there's definitely some depth at safety. They brought Peppers in last year. They have Duggar. They have Adrian Phillips still. They drafted Christian Gonzalez. They Jalen Mills is still there. There's just kind of a mess in
Mm-hmm.
that secondary for me to call him a safety. That's why I'm kind of defaulting to the linebacker a little bit.
Fair.
But in those formats where we have the dual position eligibility, I definitely think he's worth a 6th to 7th round pick in your rookie draft if you have weak depth at one of those spots.
Mm-hmm.
Those IDP best balls is probably where I'm valuing him the most
Mm-hmm.
because, he's those splash weeks, he's going to be of value to you and not just sitting on your bench.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the way I'm looking at it is maybe it's the same plan as, how the Jets converted Jamie and Sherwood and Hamza Nasir-Al-Din a few years ago, right? We know Belichick likes the safeties in more of a linebacker role versus a more typical linebacker. So that's why I think, Kyle Duggar is such a solid IDP when he's on the field, and Adrian Phillips, and to a lesser extent Jabril Peppers last year, because New England wants that kind of versatility in the box and guys that can move. So who knows? I think you're right. I think he probably will be used more as a linebacker than a safety, like you say. And at the same time, Kyle Duggar's contract is up at the end of this year. Peppers and Phillips are up in 2, but Pepper's more of a special teamer anyways, most recently. So maybe Bill is looking for his next Kyle Duggar out of the FCS as well, to replace him here soon. So yeah, I think you're probably not drafting him in a 5-round rookie draft, but yeah, maybe 6, 7, in some of those deeper leagues, you might take a shot on him with where it's like pure dart throws at that point. So yeah, good call. All right, let's go to Ji'Ayir Brown. Got drafted in the 3rd round to the 49ers out of Penn State. So I think, for Ji'Ayir Brown, I guess the day 2 capital surprised me maybe a little bit. I think I said on the last pod that he'd probably be more of a day 3 guy, but also not the worst landing spot if you're willing to be patient with him. I don't think he's starting this year, not with Hufanga, and even with Deshaun Gibson still on the roster. But Gibson could be done as soon as next season. Who knows? We'll see if they just keep bringing him back on 1-year deals until the end of time. But if he doesn't, I mean, it leaves an opportunity for Brown and Hufanga to be the starting tandem of the future, which is kind of fun. And maybe San Francisco can actually start unleashing their safeties as blitzers at a higher rate as well, because they have Hufanga, who we loved as a blitzer a couple of years ago, and now they got Brown, who also had a lot of success in that role at college. So they were still decent, like they were slightly above average, I believe, in like DB blitzing, but not at such a high rate, especially when you look at like Talanoa Hufanga and his usage at USC. At college, he really excelled in that role, and Brown kind of did as well at Penn State. So maybe there's a chance they start unleashing these guys a little bit more. Probably not somebody I'm drafting again in most 5-round rookie drafts, but I definitely don't mind taking a shot on him outside of that range and kind of stashing him on a taxi squad in those deeper leagues, hoping that he emerges, next season, basically.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the landing spot because I think Gibson is, on borrowed time for
Yeah.
sure. They lost Jimmy Ward as well, right? I
Hmm.
think that's a kind of a big loss there. And I do think that the defense is kind of evolving a little bit. You lose Aziz Ji'Ayir in free agency. Greenlaw and Warner are great. You know what I mean? Probably the best tandem in the league, if you will. So, but Hufanga did play a lot more, and it seemed like his best success is around the line of scrimmage. So I think protecting the backup plan of saying, hey, he can play if Gibson goes out, but also if Hufanga does end up missing time, we have another guy who's as successful, being that heat-seeking missile off the edge if
Hmm.
we need him to be. So the ability I like the landing spot just because of kind of the weak depth there, and the fact that you have, the 1A, 1B pass rusher in the game who's going to, cause some problems all by himself. So I do like the landing spot. I think, yeah, you're probably looking at an injury, for him to see consistent snaps year one, unless, he does really just kind of like pop off, early in some limited snaps. But yeah, I wouldn't look at him as a day one starter, but I do like, sometimes for offense, we're definitely looking at like a year two, year three, but with, IDP, especially on the safety side, with how much teams are employing the 3 safety looks and,
Hmm.
just kind of trying to match up to the offenses, whether it be a flex tight end or you know, just a 3 to 4 wide receiver set that gives them trouble. He could be a guy that could be on the field, quite a bit more than we think. But yeah, overall the landing spot could have been much worse.
Yeah.
So I definitely like it, when you're looking at guys like, a 30-plus-year-old safety in front of you who, has never been as good as he has been,
Yeah.
like the last year or so. You kind of, hold out a little bit of hope that the rookie will come in. The draft capital definitely surprised me a little bit, based on, the conversations that you and I had. So I'm curious to see how he fits into that mold, with San Fran on their third defensive coordinator in 3 years.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, no, it's a good call. It's probably not somebody for this year, but this happens a lot with rookies, right? It's hard for rookies to kind of come in and right away be considered starters. So don't be surprised if Jair Brown takes a year at least, to even behind a 33-year-old to Sean
Yeah.
Gibson. But here's a guy I think could potentially be relevant IDP rookie. So Jordan Battle got drafted in the 3rd round out of Alabama, going to the Cincinnati Bengals. What did you think about the Jordan Battle landing spot?
We talked about it. Battle's coverage grades, I think, were, kind of off the charts for
Yeah.
all the safeties in this class. Not the most athletic guy, not the biggest guy, not the, best player, but a guy who can play in a couple different roles. And I mean, what better landing spot than a position, than Cincinnati, who lost their incumbent starters for 3-4 plus years. So yeah, I like the fit there. I mean, obviously we're all still holding out hope for Dax Hill, and it seems like Battle at least appears to be behind him in the depth chart right now. But we know how much Cincinnati likes to employ those young DBs to hopefully give Patrick Mahomes trouble in
Mhm.
the late in the season. So Battle with the experience, playing under Saban and in that defense, I think now playing with another front four that's very good. I think he'll fit well in there. It is a great backup plan for Cincinnati if something goes wrong. Nick Scott is another one that we kind of loved when he was free. Now that he actually
Right.
cost something, I would rather have Jordan Battle.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that system that Cincinnati implores. I mean, we saw last year with Cam Taylor Britt was on nobody's radar, and
Mhm.
he popped towards the end of the season. So they seem to get the most out of those young defensive backs and kind of put them in a position to make plays. Battle with the history of making plays and kind of the ability to be versatile, I think is going to be a good fit there. Another safety that you're looking at, probably after a few we discussed already,
Mhm.
he might be a little bit higher. I think I have him as high as DB3. So I am pretty excited about him there because I do think he's going to see the field sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great landing spot. You nailed it. Like Von Bell, Jesse Bates, they're both gone. So they brought in Nick Scott, whatever. But I think Battle has more than enough experience. Again, playing at the highest level in college to kind of not be overly concerned about him starting as a rookie if Cincinnati goes that route, which feels like they might. I mean, the more I dug into Battle prior to the draft, the more I actually ended up kind of liking him. He popped, like you said, as the best safety in this class and almost all the stable metrics for the position that transfer from college to the NFL. I know the one area where he was poor was as a run stopper, but you know, he wasn't as effective near the line of scrimmage, but it wasn't like overly concerning about him that I would be worried that that'll translate necessarily to the NFL. It isn't something that I think is going to stick as much as some of the other stuff, like him being good in coverage. And if he does get that usage, like Von Bell in Cincinnati, which I think is possible. I mean, if I'm choosing if Dax Hill and Jordan Battle are the starters, I would lean towards Jordan Battle playing more of that Von Bell role, where Dax Hill maybe plays more of the deep role. He's just a bit bigger, has a little bit more experience playing down near the line of scrimmage as well. Dax Hill probably also better in coverage. They're both good in coverage, but Hill playing more of that slot role and it could play more of the deep role as well. So I lean towards Battle playing the Von Bell role if I had to choose. And I'm pretty excited about him as well. I think I got him safety too. But again, 5th-round rookie pick. I mean, let's not get too excited. If you want to take him first as the first safety or slightly earlier than the 5th, I wouldn't go too much higher than that. But yeah, I do like Jordan Battle. So I think he could be a relevant IDP rookie right out the gate.
Agreed.
All right, let's go to Jammie. Jammie Robinson gets drafted by the Carolina Panthers, 5th-round pick out of FSU. And so this is now we're going into day 3 here pretty quickly. We knew it wasn't a crazy deep safety class going into this draft, but just 5 safeties through the first 3 rounds pretty much confirms that. But yeah, I really liked Jammie pre-draft and would have liked him a lot more if he didn't end up in the land of the safeties over there in Carolina. I mean, now they have Jeremy Chin, Von Bell, Xavier Woods. They even brought in freaking pain in the ass Eric Rowe, who constantly is a thorn in the side of my Brandon Jones shares. But yeah, I really liked the versatility of Jammie at FSU and South Carolina. So I think there's a number of ways that they could use him, but also because of how crowded that safety room is there's a lot of ways that they probably won't use him, at least as a rookie, which is kind of a bummer. So sadly, I'm probably passing on Jammie in most rookie drafts for a lot of other maybe better dart throws out there at different positions. Even with Jeremy Chin's contract up at the end of this year, they still got Bell. They still have Woods. It's just too much to kind of hope for going right in his favor for him to be worth a rookie pick at this point. If you want to add him, after rookie draft, something like that for free, I don't mind it. maybe, they start employing more of that, again, that three safety look, which they did in the past, and he could get on the field that way. But there's a lot of bodies there right now that he kind of has to contend with. So I'm not as excited about Jammie as I was pre-draft, but yeah, hoping he proves me wrong. But what did you think about him in Carolina?
That one was a little bit of a bummer because
Mhm.
we had both kind of believed in the talent of Jammie pre-draft, and the Von Bell signing was the one there that kind of crushed, right? Like you would think that it had, the Von Bell signing basically kind of insinuated that Jeremy Chin was going to go back to that little, kind of hybrid linebacker type role.
Mhm.
Or Von Bell was going to start playing in the box like he kind of did a lot at Cincinnati. So one of the two was going to happen, but now, like you said, you still have Xavier Woods, who, I mean, not so much last year, but in Minnesota the year prior was a monster as a deep safety. Seemed like he was kind of all over it. But yeah, I don't really know what Carolina's doing. I think you're looking at a 2 to 3 year plan here with Jammie. I don't think there's any way that they let Chin walk unless another significant injury happens this year.
Mhm.
But even with that being said, I don't know. You still have Dante Jackson there. You have J.C. Horn there. Even if you go to that three safety look, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Jammie's probably in play for being
Yeah.
one of those three safeties. So I have probably 5 or 6 rookie drafts in right now. Between 5 and 7 rounds, and have yet to see him drafted.
Mhm.
He's a name to definitely keep on your radar if something happens, a preseason or camp injury, it might kind of bring him up the depth chart a little bit. But still, you would like to see him be given a chance to, even on limited snaps, kind of like prove himself. But I just
Right.
don't know where he fits here. And that's kind of definitely concerning for IDP value. You're not really interested in somebody that doesn't look like there's any kind of clear path.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few guys like that, right? It's just with there's being so many safeties, and if you're playing in a DB league, there's just it's such a big pool of players. It's not really worth kind of taking a shot on one of these guys with a rookie pick, even if it's late. If there's not like a clear path that you can see to them starting. So for now, Jammie remains on waivers, and we'll see if anything comes of that down the road. But for now, we'll leave him be. Um, let's go to this is another one kind of interesting. Jordan Howden goes to the New Orleans Saints. He was not somebody that we talked about in the pre-draft episode, but a fifth-round pick out of Minnesota going to the Saints. Did you have anything on Howden? Anything you want to talk about there?
No, he might be a guy that surprised you a little bit, but it seems like he's one of those, uh, team captain, multiple year starter, consistent, can learn from, a lot of veteran leadership there in New Orleans with Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May. I believe Jonathan Abram is on the roster there too, who,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's feelings about him, but he was valuable for IDP for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't see any kind of path where Howden would even be on my radar at all. But again, with him being drafted ahead of some guys that we might like more, who fell a little bit further in the draft
Right.
unexpectedly, I don't, I Howden wasn't a guy that was on either of our radars, and
Mm-hmm.
we definitely looked pretty deep into this class when we did the pre-draft episode. So that probably about sums it up on how I feel about him.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, the only thing I could really think of with Howden is that maybe the Saints plan to use him as more of a nickel corner. That's where he, has the most experience from college, and they have Bradley Roby there. He's really the only one that kind of fits that role. I don't know that they'd love Ugo Amadi as the next man up should something happen to Roby. So maybe that's where Howden comes in, and in that case, if he does have to fill in, he could be kind of interesting. But again, more of like a waiver pickup in season, right? If you see Bradley Roby go down, and there's news of Howden potentially stepping into that role, but outside of that, I mean, your the chances I think are slim at this point, at least as a rookie.
Agreed.
All right, let's go to another fifth round pick. This one out of Cal. Daniel Scott gets picked by the Indianapolis Colts. So again, another guy we didn't talk about. Not somebody that I mean, I had my eye on pre-draft and even post-draft. Now, doing a quick little toe dip of research on him, I'm finding it hard to get too excited about him. You know, decent size, really athletic, so that's nice. But after that, I'm just kind of lukewarm on him for the NFL. Look, he spent 6 years at Cal. I think he might actually be a doctor now. So, uh, but if we're looking at him as a player, 18.3% missed tackle rate for his career. Obviously, don't love that.
Oof.
Yeah, had a career high coverage grade prior to last year. At 87.9, but then in essentially the same deployment this past season, it came down quite a bit, 69.4, even with the exact same ball production as well, with 3 interceptions and 4 pass breakups in each of the past 2 seasons. So gives you a better idea that he really was a bit worse this past season. The good thing I think with him is that the Colts safety room is pretty uninspiring. Julian Blackmon is there and should start as the primary deep option, but then it's guys like Rodney Thomas, who is probably the favorite to start next to Blackmon, Nick Cross, who really let me down last year, losing that profitable starting job. So he's dead to me. And then, so maybe Scott gets some action due to injury or whatever, but for now, definitely not someone I'm drafting, just a guy that might pop up as a waiver option in season.
Yeah, this one screams as a special teams type draft pick. Another guy, I think that was a team captain, or God, I hope he was if he spent 6 years in college. But yeah, I mean, I see him being like free safety depth. The same with me. The one thing that jumped off was just how good of an athlete he is. So maybe that parlays into him getting some snaps, if needed, but again, we're not really, climbing over each other to draft a deep safety in IDP. So, yeah, not a whole lot of faith in him either. This is kind of typical of NFL teams to do at this point of the draft, is to, kind of get some more like smart, heady, veteran type players who are good athletes who, could learn in the system and end up being, formidable starters down the line. But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to be excited about Scott, other than, as you spoke about, the depth chart. But he's not a guy I see really, being the best player on that poor depth chart. So.
Right. Yeah, it's just hard to imagine it, right? And I mean, maybe it's something down the road, but for now, just treat him as a depth NFL player, not somebody that you look at for IDP. But that's it for the guys that we didn't cover in the pre-draft episode. Now we could get back on track here to the guys that we did cover, and one of them being Antonio Johnson, who got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 5th round pick. In the 5th round out of Texas A&M. And actually, you called the Jaguars, I'm pretty sure, at least in your prospect profile for him as a landing spot. So that was good. What did you think about Antonio going to the Jags?
So I'll probably, plant the flag on being the Antonio Johnson fan club, owner, president, CEO. Yeah, I did the IDP profile on him. I do like a ton about his game. I do think he's one of those alpha type players who's going to make his presence known. Jacksonville was a spot that I liked for him because kind of countering back here to the Colts, but a very poor defensive backfield. I don't think there's a ton there to get excited about. Rayshon Jenkins has been, the kind of consistent IDP there at the strong safety. Andre Cisco has come in, but ironically enough, I did a write up on Cisco when he came out too, and there isn't too many people who bite on ball fakes. Pump fakes worse than that guy, but Syracuse guy, so I got to be nice to him. But yeah, I see Johnson. Trey Herndon, I think, is slotted in right now to be the nickel. I think Johnson's better than him. I know Herndon's a veteran and probably is definitely going to get the first stab there, but the draft capital sucked. You know what I mean? I wish it was better, but the landing spot, I can't be too upset about. I do think there's an opportunity to kind of break through there and get him on the field. I like a lot more about him than I think most do. Obviously, the draft capital kind of proves most of those people right now, but I'm kind of hoping that he breaks through. I do like the player. I like the landing spot. He is a guy that in that sixth, seventh round, when you're talking about some of those team builds, if you're looking at a spot where you're a little weak at safety, that's a guy I'm definitely targeting. I think I have him as DB6. I'm not sure where we ranked him pre-draft, but I don't think it was too far off of that, so not a ton change for me. If anything, I was kind of encouraged by the landing spot, obviously more than the draft capital, but understood after his kind of dip in production there why he fell a little bit. But a lot more faith in him than some of the safeties that were drafted ahead of him for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair. And I think, yeah, if you're, pegging him as kind of the nickel guy there, that's really interesting, right? Because, yeah, safety, there's probably not an opportunity to start year one, right? Because they have Rayshon Jenkins, that contract of his, he's not going anywhere. And then Andre Cisco, like you said. So, um, yeah, I mean, if he could beat out Trey Herndon, that would be a lot of fun because, yeah, we liked Antonio Johnson just being like this hammer in the run game
Mhm.
too, right? So he could kind of move inside and help in run support as well. Could be a really nice fit for them if he can move up the depth chart there. And yeah, I'm not overly confident for year one, but if that's the path, then that would definitely make him more interesting for IDP because he was a very effective run support player. So like that. But yeah, we could keep going here. We'll go with Christopher Smith. So I know you like Christopher Smith as well, but he goes in the fifth round to the Las Vegas Raiders out of Georgia. So I wasn't crazy about a pre-draft, but I don't hate this landing spot either. The Raiders have been perfectly fine just kind of being mid at the safety position for the last few years. Trayvon Merrick is still going to start there, even though you might never see him on screen when you're watching the games because he spends so much time deep. But outside of him, I mean, Marcus Epps is probably the favorite to start. And, he was fine for the Eagles. Like you said, that Eagles defense made things pretty easy on their defensive backs as well. So that could be a part of it as well. He's not, a world beater by any means. And if Smith could be somebody that impresses, I don't think it's impossible for him to win a starting job there in Vegas. And if he does that, then that's a really nice kind of spot to emerge as an IDP asset. And like you've said in the pre-draft episode, just having that pedigree of being in Georgia and a leader on that defense. And there's a lot to be said about that. The fifth round draft capital isn't amazing by any means, but again, it's not a great depth chart. And if he can prove to be an effective player and make an impact for them, there's at least a chance that he could start in year one. What did you think about it?
I like Smith a lot more pre-draft. It's another Bill Belichick disciple, so
Yeah.
I'm not super. I mean, there's a lot of veterans on that roster ahead of him. Merrick is obviously going to play deep. You know what I mean? Like, I think Smith, the best thing he has going for him with that landing spot is the fact that you're gonna get assaulted with a aerial attack from Mahomes and Herbert at least 4 times a year. Um, so maybe he does get on the field. There isn't anything in that safety group that like wows me, but again, Smith doesn't really wow me. So he's a guy that to your point, I'm probably passing on.
Yeah.
Even in 7 round drafts, if there's an option to kind of throw him on a taxi, him and going back to Antonio Johnson too, like those might be guys that are worth that dart throw in the 7th round if you can either have a really deep roster or stash them on a taxi squad where you don't really. I know we typically will use that for those developing offensive guys, but don't be
Mhm.
afraid to use it for defense too. So, but yeah, not a ton to get excited about there because I mean you hit the nail on the head. Like I mean the Raiders are the definition of mid at safety, and it's just it seems like it's one of those things that's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like it was the Raiders were always like a favorite landing spot for me for one of the better safeties, the guys that I liked a lot more. I think I had Christopher Smith as like safety 10 when we did our
Hmm.
top 10 pre-draft. So, even though he's not a favorite safety of mine. The landing spot was one of my favorites, but so if it was one of the better safeties, or at least one of my favorite safeties, I'd be a little bit more excited. Where Smith, I'm just kind of hoping that I was wrong about him in the pre-draft process and that he could emerge, because I don't really, I'm not crazy about Marcus Epps either, or the other guys that they have there. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just like you said, it's a dart throw to take if you're feeling nasty, basically. Um, so that was it. Those were the top 10. But we did have a couple sleepers that we wanted to add in. We did this last episode with Joey. We threw in a couple guys that were drafted outside of the top 10, and guys that we think we kind of like, maybe either to start this year or to be decent stashes over some of the guys that were drafted ahead of them. So did you want to kick us off here with one of the guys?
Anthony Johnson, I think, is one to keep an eye on. We really liked him. A guy that kind of has the skills, has the ability. You could see him definitely being a contributor. Green Bay seems like they're always looking for that next safety. Seem to find these guys late. But Darnell Savage has been one of the most frustrating guys to roster in IDP over the past couple of years. The Jonathan Owens signing, I know that was just recently. That one kind of stung a little bit for this Anthony Johnson
Right.
hype train. Even though he was a 7th-round pick, I did still have a little bit of hope. Rudy Ford, I think, is slotted to start there, and he's kind of still, I know you made some plays last year, but I don't think he's a guy that I'm overly excited about either. But Johnson's skill set, that Lucas Van Ness landing there, Rashawn Gary, being able to come back hopefully from that injury is, they're still going to have a decent front there. With Quay Walker from last year. So I think their front seven is going to be, as good as it's been. Their problems have constantly been on the back end. Rasul Douglas has kind of been an IDP savior over the past couple of years, kind of like booming. So looking for some stability at safety. I don't know if this is Savage's last year. I mean, if it's not his last year in Green Bay, it might be his last year in the NFL. Like, that's how much I loathe him. but yeah, I mean, the opportunity is there. I don't see that being a terribly tough depth chart to kind of crack and see a few snaps early. But when you're looking at a guy from a 7th-round draft capital, you're just praying he makes the roster. You're not drafting him in even deep best ball leagues.
Yeah. It was really weird that he fell to the 7th round to me. I mean, I know he was like I think the 90th ranked player on the PFF big board. I think a lot of people had him up high like that as well. And it's weird for a player to drop to the 7th round without like obvious red flags, or at least public red flags that maybe maybe there's something that we don't know about, but typically that's what causes a big drop like that. But I haven't seen anything since. So I still like Anthony Johnson. I mean, I was actually I thought I was close to nailing this landing spot as well, but it was Antonio Johnson I said to Green Bay and not Anthony. So these guys keep messing with me here. But yeah, I know they brought in Jonathan Owens, and Jonathan Owens was great for IDP last year. He made a lot of tackles, but he was not a good NFL safety. He was really poor. So I don't think it's impossible. Rudy Ford, the same thing. These aren't guys that are, you're overly afraid of it when looking at the depth chart. I thought Anthony Johnson was good. It was his first year transitioning from corner to safety as well at Iowa State. So he was able to kind of maintain solid grades across the board, which was nice. He even added a couple interceptions for the first time in his career as a result. So yeah, you're right. The Green Bay secondary, they're in need of capable players who can start and be relied upon to play significant snaps. And Darnell Savage probably is the only full guy that you'd trust in that group because he has full-time experience. But I don't know. I mean, Johnson has over 3,000 defensive snaps of experience as well, playing all over the secondary. So I think he has a good shot to win outright, if not in a year from now. So keep an eye on him. And one more sleeper here, JL Skinner. Went to the Denver Broncos out of Boise State. I cannot remember where he was drafted. I can't read it on the thing there, but
Sixth
sixth round,
round.
right? Yeah. So JL Skinner, top 150 player on PFF's big board prior to the draft, fell to the 6th round, and this one was due to injury concerns. But I think he, maybe a steal for the Broncos. I know we both really liked him. They did bring back the 35-year-old starter of the past 4 seasons, Kareem Jackson, for another run. While other depth at the position, it just kind of consists of PJ Locke, who's a free agent at the end of the year, Caden Stearns, who has, I think, just 4 career starts in the NFL. Stearns probably the favorite to start next season over Skinner, assuming Locke and Kareem Jackson do depart in free agency or retirement. But Skinner certainly has the ability to outperform Stearns and win that starting role. I know we both liked him a fair bit pre-draft. He showed off strong coverage ability as a starter over the last 2 seasons as well, earned coverage grades over 80 in each of those seasons and totaled 6 interceptions and 7 pass breakups over that span. So even with the poor draft capital, and especially for IDP as a player with more experience playing up near the line of scrimmage, I think he's an ideal sleeper to kind of grab post rookie drafts.
Yeah, I mean, we were both real high on Skinner. I think he could
Mm-hmm.
be the steal of the draft. I don't see it taking too long before he's the starter in Denver. Last year I think Justin Simmons, Skinner, and Justin Simmons, Caden Stearns, and Kareem Jackson were all hurt at a certain point. Maybe not all together, but Simmons is kind of the IDP darling there, but he's kind of been inconsistent as well as being hurt quite a bit, but. I think Skinner's drop is 100% due to the injury and kind of the dip in production, during his last college season. But size like that, the ability to play as violent as he plays down by the line of scrimmage, are just not things that you see in typical safeties these days. So I think that's why Denver was willing to take that chance on him. And as much as Kareem Jackson coming back kind of, hurts a little bit. I think with Skinner still probably rehabbing from that injury, at least in the early part of the year, it's nice to have a veteran in front of you who's aging, kind of on the last year of his contract, if you will, but has a wealth of knowledge to be able to kind of bestow on a young player who, he's looking to come in as this kind of like freak cyborg in the secondary that Denver can definitely use. I am a Caden Stearns fan, but I don't think for IDP. I think maybe more for a little bit of kind of actual professional football. I think he's a guy that Denver can definitely use. Having Patrick Surtain Jr. is kind of nice. You can only really have to cover half the field at that point. But you have the safeties now to do it, with Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell kind of being hurt. They rotate who wants to get hurt for a couple games, it seems like, all year. So, upgrades there with Drew Sanders and stuff like that. But, again, playing in a division where all they're going to do is, try to challenge you with the pass. It is nice to kind of have, a young safety, a plethora of safeties to be able to combat that from a defensive standpoint.
For sure. Love it. There we go. I mean, again, maybe not the most exciting safety class this year, but still worth kind of combing through to note who is who and which guys are actually worth targeting in IDP leagues. So hope you all enjoyed it. Mr. Glosser, thank you, my friend, for popping on once again. It's always a pleasure to be able to chat and pick your brain for all that football knowledge. So a huge thank you again for doing this with me.
Always, never going to turn down a chance to talk with a fellow Jon.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's always a blast. We're always talking safeties, but we'll find a way to mix it up at some point in the future and talk some different IDPs as well, for sure. So I appreciate you coming on once again, and please remind the people where they could find you and your work and what you have coming up for the rest of this off season.
DynastyNerds.com. You'll see all of my work over there. Kind of getting into some Devy IDP before the college season starts, and had a little bit of success last year, with my kind of top 12 players at every position to watch out for. Some of them still in college, so there might be some repeat guys on those lists, but that's a cool one to do to kind of let the people know what what to kind of look for, even if they're just box score watching this season as the college season comes up. But all the IDP rankings, all the IDP rookies are in the Dynasty Nerds ranking on the Dynasty GM tool. I would be, I have to be a company man until that line. The Dynasty GM tool is the thing to have if you're playing
There you go.
Dynasty fantasy football at, the most competitive level, especially when you got to play against guys like Jon here and you want the biggest edge you can get. So, but yeah, all my stuff will be over there, and always around to help as those rookie drafts are getting closer, and some of them wrapping up. Don't be afraid to kind of reach out to any of us who like to help in the community to kind of give you a little bit of edge on your league mates there to make sure that what rookies to take and what rookies to pass on.
Perfect. Yes, sir. And definitely be sure to follow Jon and his work over at Dynasty Nerds and at Glosser13 on the Twitter. As for me, you can still find me here every other week on this podcast talking IDP. And you can now find me regularly on the PFF Fantasy podcast as well, talking offense, if you're into that kind of thing. Not as exciting as IDP, I know, but if you are, please check it out and let me know what you think as you have with this show. It would truly mean the world to me. If not, all my written work is on pff.com, where you can find my offense position tiers this week. They should all be up on the site by the end of this week with IDP on the way. So check that out. I would greatly appreciate it. And then next episode, we wrap up all the post-rookie draft talk by bringing back the man, the myth, the legend, Kyle Bellyfuel, to talk linebackers. So until then, thank you all very much for your support. IDP out.